DreAllDay.com.
Dre Baldwin, DreAllDay.com. Let's talk about critical thinking. This is something that I did a two-part series on my podcast, episodes 1826 and 1827, how to be a critical thinker and the habits of critical thinkers. If you have not consumed those two episodes, wherever you are listening to this, you should be able to find those. Find it on YouTube. It's again 1826, 1827, or go to workonyourgamepodcast.com. It is there as well. But the reason why I say critical thinking, I sent out a text about this in June of this year, and I got a few responses of people asking me follow-up questions that showed me that they don't even understand what critical thinking is. I had somebody say to me, well, does that mean somebody should do critical thinking every day? That question doesn't even make sense. Clearly they don't understand what critical thinking means if they're asking that question. Or somebody asked me something like, I can't remember what the other question was, but the kind of questions that people were asking showed me that they don't even understand what it means to be a critical thinker or how critical thinking is even used. First of all, let's get clear on what critical thinking is. Critical thinking and some habits of critical thinkers, and listen to my episodes so you can get the full details. But critical thinking is about questioning everything, not blindly accepting anything that's handed to you, regardless of who the source of the information or the source of your feedback is, and always being a skeptic, being a continual skeptic. To give you an example of, if you want to get a real life example of someone who's a really good critical thinker, find someone who's a good journalist. And they're harder to find these days. And I did an episode on this as well, why journalism is dying in America. It's simply because journalists aren't doing their job anymore. They're not critically looking at any information that's handed to them. They're blindly accepting things given to them by certain sources and blindly trashing anything that's coming from a different source. So basically, if they like somebody, they'll accept and make whatever they say sound good. And if they don't like somebody, they'll trash and whatever make that person said or did sound bad. And you don't have to look far to find examples of this. It's happening all the time. It's happening in academia now. Now you got professors who will trash a subject that they don't like, and they'll find a way to either dance around or affirm and validate a subject that they do like without giving any critical thought to it. And even the students, if you're a student in that class and you happen to go against the person who's in charge, the professor, they'll do this. It's happening in government. It's happening in government, academia, three These are three institutions where government, we always knew that they lied, but now it's just it's easier to tell now because now everybody's looking at it and talking about it. Whereas for the most part, we didn't pay that much attention, most of us, the average person back in the day. Now, academia, this has become very, very crazy in the academic world, and it's also become very crazy in the journalistic world to where you're not getting critical thinking anymore. People are just blindly going with the side based on their emotions and not based on objectivity. And I did a whole episode on this as well. So all this stuff is connected, how objectivity became the new controversy. Now, you're trying to be objective and you're trying to get the truth. Now people are looking at you like you're crazy instead of just going with whatever the party line is supposed to be. If any of you saw that What Is a Woman documentary, and all of you should go see it or go get it. It's online. If you haven't seen that documentary, you should get it. I think it costs to get the subscription. Get the subscription for 30 days and cancel after 30 days if you want to. But get that subscription and get it. It's worth the investment of your money and time, just so you can see how a lack of critical thinking is turning things crazy out here. And the reason why I say that critical thinking is a job, and the reason why this is so important to myself, and I would suggest that it become important to you as well, even if the subjects that have been affected the most these days have not yet affected you so much. The reason why this matters is because when we stop thinking critically, what happens is you get dogma, and you get people who are led by and driven by emotion rather than driven by actual logical thought, rather than being driven by objectivity, rather than being driven by, let's get to what is actually true, what we can actually prove, what is actually reality. And rather than having people driven by that, they're driven by, what do I feel? What are my emotions? What do I want the truth to be, rather than what the truth actually is? When you get too many people who are driven by that mindset, rather than the mindset of what is actually real, the problem is now you're going to get everyone who's driven by emotion. And when everyone in the world is driven by their emotions and their feelings, and you have completely removed truth, and you completely remove objectivity and reality, and you remove the value of facts, what happens is you start to get chaos. What you get is entropy. The second law of thermodynamics is entropy, which states, in plain language, I'm paraphrasing it, is that every object, every entity, over time is slowly moving towards a state of increased chaos. Meaning, anything that you don't have parameters in place to keep things steady as they are, then slowly it will just become more and more chaotic. If you think about it, let me give you an example. Any of you have kids, or even if you don't have a kid, you've been a kid, right? What happens if you have a room full of kids, let's say third graders, and you remove the teacher out of the classroom? What's going to happen in that classroom? It's going to become a zoo, right? The kids just going to be messing around, throwing stuff around, playing around, doing stuff that they probably wouldn't do if there was a teacher in the room. There was a responsible adult in the room. They're going to just start doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Why? Because they're kids. This is what happens. You devolve into a state of chaos because there is no gravitational center in that room. This is what happens in school. When you were in school and a substitute teacher walked in the room, you know it was playtime that day. Why? Because the person who usually maintains the discipline isn't around. So now we can play around and act the fool for this one day, and then tomorrow we'll go right back doing what we're supposed to do. Why? Because now the entropy has been removed because we got a teacher in the room. It's the same thing with adults, that when we remove objectivity, facts, logic, reason, what happens is you get entropy. Everything, now the gravitational pull is gone. Now everything is just floating around. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been to outer space. I have not. But if you see the pictures and the videos of people in outer space, right? There's no gravity in outer space. So everybody's just floating around and it's all going in all different directions. That's the same thing that happens in life when you remove these spaces. That's why critical thinking matters so much, because critical thinkers, the people, when we are engaging in critical thinking, what are we doing? We're being objective, we're being logical, we're being rational, we're looking at facts over feelings. And this is how we can check each other. If I get out of line, I'm only focusing on my emotions instead of what's factually true. Somebody can check me and say, Dre, look, I know you want the situation to be this way, but let's look at the facts. Let's look at the reality. Let's look at how things are actually going here. Let's be objective about the situation rather than emotional and subjective about the situation. And at some point, if I am also a critical thinker, or at least I got a little bit of critical thinking potential within me, when somebody checks me like that, I can say, you know what, you're right. Let me get out of my emotions. Let me get out of my feelings. Let me stop being a biatch, and let me look at this thing objectively. You're right. Thank you for checking me. Yeah, I needed that so I can get right back to what the reality is, and let's deal with the reality as it is. When I was an athlete, for example, I've told this story. I didn't play my senior year of college basketball in college because I had a run-in with the coach, and I just wasn't seeing eye to eye with the coach. So my senior year, I wasn't even on the basketball team, but I still wanted to play pro ball when I got out of school. So I had to look at myself, even though I felt like I was good enough to play pro. At that time, when I graduated, I had not really that much of a college resume. I hadn't played my senior year. I didn't have anybody checking for me to play pro, but I still wanted to play pro. So my emotions wanted to play pro and believed I was good enough to play pro. But the objective reality said, dude, you ain't got nothing going on that proves you're a pro level player. That was the objective fact. The challenge for many of you is that if you were in that situation, you would have spent the next 10 years of your life bitching, whining, complaining about what could have been, what should have been, what you deserved, rather than looking at the objective reality and saying, you know what, this is what I need to do since the situation is the actual situation. I had to look at myself, and I wrote about this in my book, Work on Your Game. I wrote about it in a couple of my books. I had to look at the situation realistically and logically and factually. Like, yo, I ain't got nothing going on. All right, how am I going to actually get to the level that I want to get to? Because right now I'm at 0. Even though I believed I had the skill, I was at 0. So when I got clear with myself and objective and truthful and factful with myself about where I was really at, then I could do something about the situation. But until I got objective and truthful with myself and critically thought about where I was really at, I couldn't have gotten past the emotion and really gotten to the facts. You get what I'm saying? And this is why critical thinking matters so much. And I'm just using my basketball experience as an example, but this applies to everything. And this is why we need everybody to be a critical thinker. Being a critical thinker is not like you're born one and then you stop being one. You could be a critical thinker at any moment when you decide that you're going to be a skeptic, meaning anything that is handed to you, you are automatically skeptical of it. Doesn't mean you're a negative person. Being a skeptic just means you do not just blindly accept anything that's told to you, regardless of who said it. Your mom can tell you something. Just because your mom said it doesn't mean you should accept it. Just because the president said it, just because your favorite rapper said it, or some basketball player you like said it, doesn't mean you should accept it. That's what critical thinking means. Doesn't mean I won't agree with you, but I'm going to verify what you said. In other words, they call it trust but verify. Yeah, you said it, but let me make sure that what you're saying is actually true before I just go ahead and repeat it. That's what it means to be a critical thinker. It also means you question everything. Somebody presents something to you as a factual piece of information, ask them a simple question. How do you know that's true? That's what a critical thinker does. How do you know that that's true? How do we know that I should accept that as a fact? Just because somebody's a teacher, just because they're an athlete, just because they're famous, just because they're publicly noted for being successful, just because they're a politician, you're supposed to just accept what they told you? The answer is no. Not to a critical thinker, no. Now, to an emotional thinker, yeah. But to a critical thinker, absolutely not. So we need everybody to be in their critical thinking mode as often as possible, so that, because when people are in critical thinking mode, this is the only way you can satisfy a critical thinker, with objectivity, logic, ration, and facts. And we need logic, rationality, objectivity, and facts. Why? Because those are the gravitational pull that keep us from falling victim to entropy, which is chaos. We get into a state of chaos when we don't have these gravitational pulls in place. So hopefully, and I know this makes sense to all of you, but if I can clarify anything, go ahead and leave it in the comments, or you can text me my daily motivation text that everybody gets every day who's in my text community. My number is 305-384-6894, and go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's where you can work with me directly in my group of one-on-one programs. Again, that's workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all